It's my pleasure to give you a welcome. We are going to record this session, as you could hear, and we are deeply privileged to have today Dr. Ranil Senanayake, who is the visionary behind Analog Forestry, together with Galo, Chiriboga. Before officially starting this meeting, I want to invite you to look for this button, interpretation, because we have simultaneous interpretation available into Spanish or French language. So you just go in your Zoom screen down and look for the bottom of down on your screen that says interpretation and choose the right channel, French or Spanish, or if you want to stay in the key main language, English. Okay. It's very important. The meeting will be held mostly in English. Good. If you have any troubles, let us know via chat. Also, we can try to help you or navigate you via chat. And while we are waiting, because there are still some people joining us today, I invite you to introduce yourself in the chat. You can put your name, your organization, your country, one emoji that expresses how you arrived today to this meeting. So we also see who is connected and where are we connecting our presence. I also kindly ask you to mute your microphones when you join and if you are not speaking. Thank you very much. So we can already see Kenneth introducing himself from Kenya. Welcome, Kenneth. This is you. My name is Luby Bogantes. I am based in Costa Rica. I'm Capacity Strengthening Coordinator for IAFN. Welcome, Eric Torres from Guatemala. Galo, Bob, nice to see. Friends of Analog Forestry joining today. And I was thinking about a very interesting quote before this event when I was preparing, and that came to me, which says, it's from François René de Chateaubriand, and it says, forests precede civilizations and deserts follow them. So I think we're going to touch on many aspects of this today in our conversation today. And just with these opening words for reflection or philosophy, I pass it on to Virginie, our colleague.
Hello, everybody. It's so good to see everyone. My name is Virginie Demeter. I lead communications, network building activities at the IFN. And it's a great joy to be together today, the day right after Earth Day. And as we slowly get into the topic of today, we want to invite you to share and connect with each other over a moment of appreciation for our common home. You can do it in the language that you prefer. We invite you to share a few lines describing Earth's beauty where you are right now. If you have a photo at hand, you can add it in the chat. If not, no worries. You can just write a small description so that we know a bit more about each other and about Earth's beauty everywhere that we are. I think that is something that has gotten us together today, this shared love and this shared will to create a more sustainable future so that our civilization is not followed by a desert, as Luby was saying. I think that's something we are joining forces around. And if we can go to the next slide, we want to tell you and invite you to register for this . with our allies from Cheers in the USA who are also present today. Thank you so much for this. This is going to be a virtual course that you can attend from anywhere in the world. If you are interested in analog forestry, you want to find out more, you can still subscribe until the 7th of May. And we are going to put a link in the chat so that you can find out more information in a minute. But we really invite you to participate and to learn more. Today is going to be a first step, but we're going to have this introductory course very soon. I can see some beautiful photos starting to pop up in the chat. It's so great to see everybody's reality through your own eyes and voices. And now we can go to the next slide before we start the conversation. We just wanted to let you know that this 2025, we are celebrating 30 years since the foundation of the International Analog Forestry Network in the wake of Ranil Senanayake's work, who inspired dozens and hundreds of people, collectives, women's groups, organizations, communities, and families to deepen their relationship with nature around them, really learn from the forests and become change makers in their territories. So that's a cause for celebration. And this Global Analog Forestry Conversations series will continue during the year in celebration of 3 decades building a movement that advocates for biodiversity as our priority. This is the first one, and we could not have started otherwise than by inviting to the space Dr. Ranil Senanayake. We will hold a roughly 40 minutes conversation today led by the Ecuadorian trainer Galo Chiriboga, who is also the coordinator of REFA, the Ecuadorian Analog Forestry Network. And then we will have some space to share with Ranil some of the many questions that you asked when registering for this webinar. So without further ado, over to you, Galo, and let's start this conversation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Louis and Virginie. It's truly an honor to be here and to have this opportunity to talk with Ranil. I have to say that his ability to weave together science, traditional knowledge, and a profound respect for nature has given us a methodology that is transformative as it is regenerative. So I'm gonna start by going to the first question, and are we ready? Yes. Just hands up. Okay. So Dr. Ranil, can you tell us why it is not enough to just plant trees in order to face the current ecological changes? And please think about how you realized this and came up with the solution in 1980s. What is the analog forestry potential between other restoration and conventional restoration efforts? Ranil.
Bueno, gracias Galo. And todo y todas, discúlpeme, yo voy a hablar en inglés porque aquí en Sri Lanka no hay mucha chance para practicar en español, ¿no? Por eso mi español es muy débil. So yo voy a hablar en inglés. Disculpe. Okay, now, you see, the thing is, when you say, why is it not enough just to plant trees in order to face the current ecological challenges? When we use the word ecological challenges, we must look at the ecosystem by definition. And then we understand that then the reason for not only focusing on trees becomes very clear. Because when you look at a forest as an ecosystem, and you look at the forest in its biodiversity, trees account for 1% of the biodiversity of any forest anywhere in the world. 99% of the biodiversity of a forest is in things other than trees. Yes, 89% of the biomass of a forest could be trees. It takes that biomass to protect the biodiversity. However, if you look at it in terms of biodiversity and you only focus on trees, you have lost the forest for the trees. Okay?
Thank you, Ranil.
Sure.
And 30 years have passed since you inspired to create Analog Forestry movement. Now materialized in the International Analog Forestry Network, would you say that the role of analog forestry is different now than before? Or is the current state of the world it's important to keep using AF or analog forestry to restore critical ecosystems?
Okay, let me share something with you then. Because you see, when I started looking at analog forestry, I was trying to understand the reasons for the loss of the reptiles, the amphibians, the birds, etc., that I was studying. And then I find that one was their habitat has been lost, and secondly, what was replacing their habitat had no micro environment or food possibilities for the native biodiversity to come back. So then I reckoned, looking at this thing, we have to think about designing for the rest of the forest, because where we live today, we are humanity, we have cleared all the forests of the world. And none of us are going to leave the land that we are living on and say, oh, let it go back to forest. So however much romantically we may want the forest to come back, it's never going to come back, because human beings are now occupying the areas that were once occupied by forest. If we want anything of that forest to return, we have to create something analogous, similar to the forest, that will help the biodiversity to come back and also help the farmer who is on that land to recognize that this system will also provide income and a way of life for that person. So this is our challenge. How do we design to bring the forests back into the farms, into the cities, into the suburbs, in such a way that it will be welcomed by the people, because here is a source of income and sustenance for the communities.
Thank you, Ranil. Yes, so we are going to pass to the second phase. This is called the science and the practice of analog forestry. So can we take a moment and speak of the members of the audience that we don't know what is analog forestry? Can you summarize in 4 or 5 main steps to implement analog forestry in a place, in a degraded land? Yeah, and can you summarize a little bit?
Of course, if you want to start analog forestry, you first must recognize the forest as a process. The forest is not just a collection of large trees, because if you cut a forest and leave it, trees don't come back. What comes first are the grasses. The grasses will fix some soil, and then you will find the shrubs and the bushes will come back. A little later, the pioneer trees will come back. This is called serial succession. A forest has to slowly return. So that when we do analog forestry, we have to recognize that a forest is a dynamic thing. It's a process. And we have to facilitate that process by understanding that process, not just going and planting a few trees here or there.
And you're talking about the forest, you're talking about how do you implement like analog forestry in a new parcel, for example? Of course, knowing that is totally degraded, and what is the steps?
Okay, first you go into an area, you recognize the forest as a process. Then, in any area, you look at the most mature tree-dominated ecosystem in that area. Once you have found that, you have to then understand its architectural structure. We do that by using a physiognomic formula that people who do analog forestry are trained in. Once we do the physiognomic formula of the mature system of that area, we then know what its architectural structure is. Then we go back and do the same exercise in the area that we intend to do our work in. And then we compare the two formula and look for the gaps. And the gaps between the mature forest and what you're going to now build up are the gaps that you have to fill up in order to have it moving towards being analogous to the natural system. So once we have know what the gaps are, then we choose the replacement species to fill those gaps according to the set goals of the landowner. The landowner might want his land to be one that produces food. Then you design trees and plants and vegetation that provide the food. He might be somebody who's interested in birds and wants to do ecotourism. Then you will focus on materials or trees and plants that attract these things. Or it might be somebody who is interested basically in conservation of rare species, butterflies, insects. Well, there are species of vegetation that are food plants for the butterflies, for instance. You would then start looking for those to include those in your design. So the thing is, once you have made a map of your area, once you have done the formula, then you have to work with the landowner to choose what species you're going to include into your design to meet up with the goals of that landowner.
That's great, and also I feel like practicing analog forestry in my in these few years, I can say that analog forestry is like a stone, like another piece of all these other methodologies. Can you describe like a little bit of the difference between these other methodologies and analog forestry? Can you see some differences?
Yeah, well, there are all these methods that we use for restoration or building back vary from a monoculture. So you could use a pinus or a eucalyptus or a teak monoculture, and we still call it a forest, which it is not, to a home garden, which is more on permaculture principles, shall we say. We are looking for shrubs and we are looking for other crop plants. But then we have to stop and say, okay, we've got our crop plants, we've got our shrubs. What about the biodiversity that we once shared that area with? We have to ask, then you realize, oh my gosh, yes, of course, I have to start including plants that either give Phyllotileomata for the amphibians to breed in, plants that produce food for the hummingbirds, plants that produce food for the butterflies, whatever your goals are. For that, you go to our database, and that's why we maintain a database. And from the database, then you choose those plants for your design.
So can we say that analog forestry is based on structure and functional ecological functions, and maybe some of the other like methodologies may focus on production of food for humans, maybe?
You're right. Most of the other approaches do not consider the native mature ecosystem. When you do analog forestry, it is critical that you understand and you observe the native, the local, mature ecosystem. That is your model. In most other systems, they just say, plant so many species, this is good for food, this is good for nuts, this is good for dyes, whatever. But in analog forestry, no, you don't do that. You look at it in terms of first the structure and the function, and that is what brings the design that you have to do, that you have to bring to your farm.
And for having this ecological success and resilience, what do you think are the most critical aspects that we have to think about? You already say biodiversity and think about other plants, but can you like think about other critical
Sure.
aspects?
There are many critical aspects. Now, what we spoke about up to now is the above ground biomass. We have to consider the below ground biomass. Now, when you consider the soil, the living soil, we are talking about a dynamic ecosystem that for millions of years maintained the ecosystem above, because the diversity of the soil microorganism ecosystem and the force that it produces, the energy it produces, is what gives agriculture its sustainability. It's what maintains the forests. So yes, we have to look at the soil. That's one aspect of it. Then we can look again at what we have and look at our biomass and look at it not only in biomass, we can look at it in terms of its ecological functions. Now, what are the ecological functions? One critical function is the cooling factor. Now, today with climate change, temperatures are going up. It's going to pass 40 degrees in many countries, and it's going to go beyond. It's happening today. To all of us who work with plants and trees, we must be aware that the lethal temperature for chlorophyll is 39 to 40 degrees, after which it begins to denature. So after 40 degrees, chlorophyll begins to break apart. The hotter it gets, the more it breaks apart, and eventually it will collapse. What makes it collapse is not only the heat, but the time it is exposed for. These are the heat waves that we are all now getting familiar with. And the longer a heat wave stays in an area, the more the crop will go down, your productivity will go down, food production will go down. This is the future we have to face. With analog forestry, we are creating photosynthetic biomass in a large three-dimensional area. What photosynthetic biomass does is it produces transpirative cooling. Each large tree gives you a cooling factor of about 1,200,000 British thermal units, which is about 10 room-sized air conditioners. Now, if you have an analog forest established around your farm, you can keep the ambient temperature of your farm 2 or 3 degrees cooler than the temperature outside. That will make the difference between having food and not having food. That is how analog forestry can help people adapt into this future that we are moving into, not only in terms of looking after the biodiversity and productivity, but also ensuring that our production can go into the future given climate change. So these are some of the advantages we have when we are moving through with analog forestry.
Thank you, Ranil. So going back a little bit to the pristine forest and the F1 that we say like physiognomic formula number one is determined in practice by these like pristine areas with big trees. But when you don't have, we have this question very often, and when we don't have the source of information, when the forest is not there to learn from the forest, what do you recommend to get the
Yeah.
inspiration or
What
the
you do, yeah, in many areas, as we said before, much of the forests have disappeared. And people will go, but there's no forest here. Then what we have to do is we have to go back into the literature. We have to say, what does the literature tell us? Is there any art of these areas? Is there any tradition or stories from these areas? So we have to then reach out and try to reconstruct what people knew was in that area. When we do our reconstruction, we also have to do our reconstruction with an acute awareness that there is going to be climate change that we have to face. And whatever we reconstruct and build up, that gives us an opportunity now to create a synthetic design that takes climate change variables also into consideration.
Thank you, Ranil. Yeah, now we can pass to the other topic that is socioeconomics and economic and community aspects. What do you think beyond ecological restoration? What the role of analog forestry play in strengthening local communities and indigenous knowledge systems?
Well, a couple of things. In terms of indigenous knowledge gave us a way to understand our ecosystems as our ancestors understood them and worked with those ecosystems. But in the future to come, our indigenous knowledge is not going to help us very much in a changing climate because everything is changing. So we have now to take our indigenous knowledge and have a synthesis, a new synthesis, a neosynthesis between the indigenous knowledge and science, where we understand what the changes are going to be, what the indigenous knowledge tells us about these plants and about these animals and about these ecosystems. And we have to be able to have a synthetic or synthesized approach to management into the future. And this is why it's really important to consider traditional knowledge, of course, and of current scientific knowledge, because that is the only way we can face the future effectively.
Thank you, Ranil. In many regions, economic interests often favor monoculture and plantations over biodiverse forests. What are the economic arguments in favor of analog forestry? What do you think is?
Sure. One is people's concern about the environment and about biodiversity, about sustainability, and the farmer. For analog forestry, we have the certification system of forest garden products. We can use that certification system to give our farmers a better price for their products in the marketplace. So this is one way that our knowledge can help the farmers, and our system, having a certification system that can promise the consumers, yes, our products are meeting with these goals that you consumers are all looking for. Now that is using the current existing marketplace. But there's something else, and that is analog forestry gives us the opportunity to start looking at ecosystem services and the value of ecosystem services. Robert Constanza and the economists, when they started looking at the value of ecosystem services, they give us a value of about $176 trillion a year in the worth or the value of ecosystem services. But up to now, there is no effective capitalization of this value. One of the ways that we could look at it is, one, looking at the conservation value, which now at the moment, using the new company in Sri Lanka and Singapore called Aqualabs. The Aqualabs has an ecological credit index, which measures the ecological values across many, many overlays in a piece of land, starting from the biodiversity, the birds, the reptiles, etc., looking at the soil, looking at the above ground biomass, the below ground biomass, they come up with a value. Now, the index value then is guaranteed by the owner that the index value will be maintained over a period of time, 5 years, on a contract. This contract now and the value is then taken and tokenized and offered up into the market, into the conservation market, because this is guaranteed that everything within that ALCI index is contracted and will be conserved. And we raise payments for that. Another way of looking at it is, we are looking now at primary ecosystem services, the first ecosystem service, which is the production of clean water and oxygen through photosynthesis. Now, this has been going on around the world as we breathe the photosynthetic, mostly fossil oxygen from old photosynthesis. That's the global commons. Now, we are now looking at a system where we can now contract farmers to produce this primary material, that is a primary ecosystem service of oxygen or clean water, and deposit this material in the global commons for you and I and everybody to breathe. But this transaction is maintained as a QR code, all the data. At the end of 4 years, the farmer is paid well for looking after this material. The investor gets the QR code of the oxygen and clean water that he or she owns, but has deposited it in the global commons, like depositing it in a bank. You can call for it anytime, you deposited it. That's your certificate. This, we believe, is the way to a new economy, which we call the oxygen economy. And this economy is an economy that puts value on the action of life, because the current economy, everything is living that we can work with, but the timber we have around us, the coffee we drink, everything was once living, but it has to be dead and processed to enter the current economy. In the new economy that looks at the production by life, they look at the production through photosynthesis. In that economy, we are putting a value on the action of life, and we are putting the value of maintaining a living leaf on a tree over time, as opposed to plucking it and having it dead and going in the old economy. So through analog forestry, we can create areas that have the largest amount of photosynthetic biomass, because we look at not only the trees, we look at the lianas, we look at the epiphytes, we look at the ferns, the herbs, everything, all of that contributes photosynthetic biomass to our environment, which is then creating the primary ecosystem services of oxygen creation and cleaning water into the atmosphere.
Taking all these thoughts for the future, what do you think the International Analog Forestry Network, AFN, will be or must be significant challenges since its creation. What do you see AFN to be in the next years, or will have to be?
Well, I think that if all of us understand
el volumen, por favor?
a forest in terms of what it is, in terms of its functions, and in terms of its biodiversity, we will find that there is tremendous value, unrealized value, in the generation and the building up of both biodiversity and ecosystem services. What we should be doing as the IFAN, as a network, is working with all of our countries to demonstrate to the convention system that this approach meets up with practically all the goals that the United Nations have set out for biodiversity and sustainable development. And that is where we should be working, I believe, as a group, looking at the examples we have and reaching out to the international system and saying, help us strengthen our members, because our members can be the lighthouses that demonstrate to the farmers in their countries and their areas of, one, how to respond to the coming changes, two, how to enter into a new economy.
And in that words, what are the compelling arguments for the governments and organizations and farmers to adopt this methodology? What will you think is the priority strategy for that to talk with the governments?
Well, it depends. That's where the network comes in. See, we have members, and all our members tell us in their particular country, our governments are thinking this way. Another country says we are thinking that way. In the network, we have all the data that we can share with each other and to demonstrate how we can produce models that meet up with the political statements or the needs that they state, and we can demonstrate that our system can actually respond to what they require. It's up to us now.
Okay. Sorry.
Up to us now to demonstrate our capacity, number one. Then our capacity to respond is the first thing. Secondly, our capacity to be able to report on what we are doing in the terms of what our governments want to hear as the development process. And that is how we can help each other.
And finally, what do you believe is the most important message for the newcomers to the concept of analog forestry? And how can we motivate them and to implement and explore this methodology in our contexts?
Well, to most people who are interested, we are interested in a sustainable world. We're interested in handing the world in a better state to the children, to the future that's coming before us. Traditionally, in all traditions, what was respected was the adult, sometimes the grandfathers, would be going out and planting a tree that they know that they will never be able to sit under the shade of that tree. They do that in the faith, knowing that it will grow and provide the shade. That is the ethos we have to adopt. We are out there to create the forest that other people will sit under, to create the mechanisms through which other people can make income, and to create the environments that are going to be stable into the future. So that is our task. That is what we have taken on. And that is what we should proudly be able to show the world and share with the world.
Thank you, Ranil. These are our questions, but as Louis and Virginie said, we have a lot of questions from our audience. So I'm
Sure.
gonna start by throwing some of the audience questions.
Sure.
Ana Isabel from Guatemala asked, which are the most hard ecosystem you have been working and why?
Well, one of the most difficult ecosystems I've been working in is in Cuba, in Estado de Guantanamo, where the soil has become salted because of the irrigation, for the sugarcane irrigation.
Mhm.
And there was Marabou had come and, he said thorny plant had come and taken over that whole thing. So we had to now, A, grow a soil, and B, get rid of the plants. And we found that using trees properly and getting the shade up there was very, very effective in stopping the weeds. And also, the moment the trees start growing effectively, sometimes we had to build what we call monticolas, little mountains, so that the salt wouldn't hit when the surface water was evaporating, the salts wouldn't damage the roots. But as they grew, the organic matter started growing, and we managed to start growing a soil above it. And today, I think I have some pictures of it. It's all covered with shade. So
It would
yeah.
be great to send some of that pictures. I didn't know you were working in Cuba. So we have the second question from Ramiro Morejon from Ecuador. It can be a forestry, analog forestry applicable to urban areas?
Yes, it is. The thing is, you have to be analogous, similar to the forest. So in an urban area, you haven't got much space. You've got a little area. And you say, but the buildings around you are giving you the shade, just like a giant forest would. So you have some shade. The sun shade is controlled. Then you grow the trees properly so that the humidity stays in your area like the forest. So you are analogous to the forest. That's how you have to think. And then, because of the tall buildings are there, is holding and with your plants, you're holding the humidity, then you can think about putting understory plants that comes from the rainforest and building it up right in the middle of the city and be analogous to the forest.
Here we have from Sri Lanka. I don't know if I am saying the name right. Dunwasha Hayatasya. But how can analog forestry be adapted to urban and peri-urban environments to not only restore biodiversity? You already said something about that, but if you can like also add
Yeah,
some
also,
experience.
and in the peri-urban, it becomes even easier because you got more land and you got more space. And in peri-urban ecosystems, you can also work to create corridors for wildlife. For instance, groups, neighbors can get together, and you can then have butterfly feeding plants across a neighborhood, and you'll have these butterflies moving across your corridors of birds, food plants for the birds. As a community, you can come together and you can bring all these features into a peri-urban environment. And it also does the other job of helping people come together as a community, because normally we are separate from each other. But if we are building around to make this like a forest, make this like a place with corridors where biodiversity can flow, it's also a good tool to bring the community together.
Thank you, Ranil. And yes, for example, I am putting in the road that is public road. I am planting a lot of fruit trees so they can like grab from outside, and that can
Exactly.
also be.
Exactly.
We have third question, Josefina Tabudlong from Philippines. How can high soil acidity be neutralized to allow crop variation?
Okay. High crop acidity, with the soil is very acid, you got to use trees and species that will help to change the pH of the soil. Some trees have the capacity to do that, especially the trees of the Moraceae, family Moraceae. In the Philippines, autocarpus, they use 3 or 4 species of autocarpus, and that'll be very useful to use. In addition to that, if you're composting and using compost in your farms, please focus on using dolomite in your compost, because dolomite not only fixes your pH, but also gives you both calcium and magnesium into the soil. So these are some of the approaches I would recommend in that area.
Thank you, Ranil. We have some other questions from the in the Zoom. Here we have some from Leticia Monk and from Argentina. She's asking if it is possible to work simultaneously in agricultural issues, but also in conservation of forests. And that's what analog forestry is, no?
Absolutely, yes, because it then helps. Analog forestry helps to bring back non-target species. That is, species that we'd never otherwise consider. They're not food, they're not something that we sell, but analog forestry helps bring all that back into our production area. We create more space for the biodiversity.
Okay, and I think we have last question. Maybe we can talk about like a little bit of Teobroma. So Andres Farroñay from Peru, from RBO, ask, what are the options of cacao and other Teobromas to be incorporated in our formulas?
Absolutely, because most of the theobromas are evergreen, so they're V, and they're normally in the 10-meter range at the max. So they're sort of undergrowth species. And yeah, absolutely. And it's not only cacao, but things like cupuaçu, you know, which is nice and open species. You can start mixing your theobromas in your system also very effectively.
Yeah, if I can say something like Theobroma bicolor is a big tree, and then you
Exactly.
have Theobroma grandiflorum,
The
copasu,
cacao.
and cacao can be in the lower story,
Uh-huh.
and you can like combine like you can make a known a forest by for only Theobromas and Iranias, and that's my favorite ones.
Yeah.
I have a comment. It's a question, but a comment from Sarita
Yeah.
Macas from Ecuador, and she asked, "When are you coming to Ecuador?" And thank you for your example and continues to show love to all of us. That's so
I'd love
your
to.
life.
I'd love to. Yes, well, soon, hopefully, and then I can meet everybody when I come. But yes, no, it is important for all the people who are doing analog forestry to understand that at the moment, we have something with us that is a good tool that can help the world face the changing climate, face the changing future. And if we, all of us, become good at what we are doing, and we are able to teach other people how to respond and not to be scared, not to have fear about the future that's coming ahead of us, we can face it. We have the knowledge. And it's only people coming together as a group who can put this knowledge together to create a forest where there was nothing before.
I Virginie, I don't know. We have more time, no? Yeah, we have 7 minutes more. We can add some questions. I don't know.
Okay.
Um, but I have this question of course, many people ask the difference between analog forestry and other methodologies, and I think about this like as a toolbox. And you can use permaculture, you can use syntropic agriculture or analog forestry in the same spot, and you can like define what are the needs or what are the important things. But here the question is, what is the permaculture and analog forestry difference? And as we talk about a little bit, but if you can
Oh, yeah.
something.
Oh, the difference basically is in analog forestry, you have to use the forest, the mature forest of that area as your model. That is your model. So that is the first difference, right? Second difference is that you have to consider your non-target species that will not give you food, not give you income or anything. That is the biodiversity, the frogs, the snakes, the lizards. You have to consider that as a part of your design. And finally, analog forestry has a very formal way of looking at a forest and codifying it using a physiognomic formula. Analog forestry has a database that allows you to choose for species depending on what your end goals are. And these are the differences that analog forestry practitioners have as opposed to any of the other approaches.
Thank you, Ranil. And I have one question of my own, and it is about like how do you feel like the evolution of analog forestry can be, for example, in this new like learning about fungus, for example, and mushrooms. What do you feel like there's spaces to analog forestry to grow?
Well, consider everybody says we need biodiversity back. Everybody says we need forests. Analog forestry is the only way that you're going to get both back. Because if you just plant trees for timber, you're not going to get your ecosystem services nor your biodiversity back. And if you just look at only the biodiversity, the landowner will say, how can I live just focusing on biodiversity? I must be able to make a living on my land. Analog forestry helps you to combine all these goals. And that's why practitioners, the more you practice, the more you do it, you will have the models that is going to be essential for your particular country to begin to adopt, to extend into the farms in order to help our farming communities.
And I know that you have your own forest, Ranil, and the work is finished, or you keep adding plants and trees every time. You keep adding the design.
No, you see, what we have done now, and something that all the people who are doing analog forestry should understand. What we are doing now is we are looking at the piece of land that we have built up, and we are mapping it out in terms of its serial stages. How many acres have we got in a first serial stage? How many in the second, third, fourth serial stages? Okay. Once we have mapped that out, then we look at the value of the biodiversity, of the biomass, above ground, below ground, right, of each stage. And we have now developed a protocol to do this. And we can now effectively go to any area and use this protocol to measure and value the different stages of the ecosystems. Once in a land we have done this, then this becomes the total ecosystem value or the index value when we combine all that of that piece of land. Now, if the owner of that land says, yeah, I have a very high value, and I agree to conserve this value, that concern, that agreement could be written off in a contract for 4 years or 5 years, usually 5 years, and that value then can be tokenized, sold on the market, and it's a totally new product for the farmer who could never ever dream of getting money for that before. So there's analog forestry now gives the highest value possible when this kind of economy starts moving into the farm.
I have to say this was a great conversation. I don't know if Louis and Virginie have other questions, but I am so happy to talk with you, Ranil, and I'm so honored to learn from you again. And
My
thank you
pleasure.
so much. I don't know, Louis, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much, Ranil, for your words. It resonated with my heart when you said that we are the lighthouse in our communities and ecosystems and many other things that you shared with us today. We still have a little bit of time, so I would propose that we can, I will hand it back to you, Galo, but we can open the microphones if somebody wants to ask a question live from our audience present here today. Maybe raise your hand if you have a question.
Raise your hand, that would be the best. So
yes.
we can give the words to people. Yeah.
Thanks. And while people are maybe thinking about their questions, I saw one question from Mandy Merklein from Permamed in the chat, which says, can you talk about analog forestry application in Mediterranean climates? Are there any examples?
Sure. I've been out in Spain once looking at some of the material there. Analog forestry in the Mediterranean climates is relatively easy because the oak forests that were the traditional forests of that area, the dominated forests of that area, provide the perfect model for us to be analogous to. Now, once we look at the Mediterranean forests there, we look around the world and we find that much of the Andes, parts of the Andes, have similar climates. But of course, the plants are different. There are crop plants, there are berries, there are herbs, there are many plants. The crops are different. But they're analogous to some of the plants found in the Mediterranean area. So if the Mediterranean area starts building up a database of the global species available in the Mediterranean type zones around the planet, you could then start looking at wherever in the planet you're living at, and having the knowledge of this vast array of plants that is possible for you to use to create an analogous system similar to the mature Mediterranean ecosystem, but with trees and plants that have global demand. Now, when we are doing that, we should also be looking at the native biodiversity. But consider, since these plants are coming, for instance, in Sri Lanka, here we have the rainforest. And in the rainforest, there is tall Dipterocarpus trees, right? But when we go to create something that is a V7, we can't use the Dipterocarpus. The farmer says, no, there's no use for me. It won't give me any food. It won't give me anything. So we say, okay, we go to our database, and in a rainforest, what do you find that's similar? Aha, durian. So we take the durian to the farmer, and the farmer says, yes, I will plant that. Now, durian is also this tall tree, right, that fits in the same formula, but of course, gives valuable fruit. So, but it doesn't come from Sri Lanka. It comes from Malaysia and Indonesia. So So similarly, or I could use trees in Sri Lanka, something that comes from the Amazon, right? So this is when I work with in the tropical area. Same thing in the Mediterranean zone. You must now start building up a good database, a firm database of the plants that will grow and perform in that zone, and then use that database to build up your robust design for whatever area you're working in.
And also what we find out in the last design process is that
Uh-huh.
in these Mediterranean spaces, you have
Climate.
like different formulas, and you have a dominant tree or broad or palm that was the dominant in some of the spaces. So you can also like think about like mixing some of these like different formulas, like physiognomic formulas, number one, into your place and find the best like I don't know mix or fit into your whatever
Remember,
you're going to.
remember principle 12, the last principle in analog forestry is be creative. We learn all this stuff, but be creative. As you said, it's for the individual as an artist and as a scientist to be creative with this knowledge and to create whatever he or she creates is their design, it's their creation, it's their art.
We have some hands up. I see Diego and Angelito Zuko there. Do we give them the space? Yeah.
Sí, muy buenos días, estimados amigos.
Hey.
Voy a hablar en español, estimado Ranil,
Sí, sí.
qué gusto, mi gran maestro.
Qué gusto verte. Bueno, pregúntame. Qué emoción. Sí, ¿no?
Bueno,
Para mí también.
agradecerle y un gusto verlo. A los tiempos, Ranil, recuerdo por los primeros años de la década de los 90 nos conocimos y esta semilla que usted sembró,
Ajá.
ha crecido.
¿Así? ¿Así? ¿Por qué?
Tenemos por todo el Ecuador, desde la
Ajá.
costa, la Amazonía, la
Ajá.
región de los Andes, forestería análoga, en diferentes estadios,
Qué
y
bueno.
todos nos hablan del doctor Ranil. Muy agradecido, estimado Ranil, por este mensaje, este sistema que nos ha dejado para restaurar ecosistemas. Y hemos recorrido, y usted ha recorrido también países de América Latina y se ha ido poniendo esta semilla. Hoy tenemos la rifa, ¿no? La sede que está en Costa Rica, que nos habla de forestería análoga, de sus conocimientos, de sus experimentos, de sus ensayos que hoy en día están plasmados, no en papel, plasmados en la naturaleza y están dando resultados en gran medida y siendo alternativas. Hoy todo el mundo habla, los que estamos ya en la onda de la restauración ecológica, de la biodiversidad, como una metodología que nos ha dado mucha alternativa. Ya no es teoría. Ahora tenemos ejemplos muy buenos en América Latina, en varios países, y Ecuador, que fue la sede, la semilla que pusimos, hoy en día está dando grandes frutos. Estamos ampliando. Hay un grupo grande de REPA, liderado por nuestro gran amigo Galo Chiriboga, quien está al frente de la REPA en Ecuador. Hay una comunidad muy grande de seguidores de usted, estimado Ranil, y eso me alegra.
Ay, gracias.
Me da mucha alegría poder verlo, saludar a los tiempos. Cada día aprendemos más de usted. Cada momento aprendemos. Aprendemos de usted y nos deja una gran tarea porque tenemos que ir a los bosques a aprender más, y con los pasos que usted nos da, la naturaleza nos acaba de complementar para regresar a restaurar los ecosistemas o estos bosques antropogénicos. Qué linda enseñanza, estimado Ranil. Espero y con mucha sinceridad que algún rato podamos estrechar las manos en Ecuador nuevamente y podamos vernos, estimado Ranil. Muchas gracias, disculpen audiencia, gracias, pero quería saludar a mi gran amigo que lo conocí de muchos años, ya más de 30 años, estimado Ranil. Como rifa tenemos ya 30 años, pero nos conocimos mucho antes, cuando no sabíamos qué es la forestería análoga y había un gran interés y una inquietud de aplicar esta metodología. Y ahora pues los resultados son tan grandes, estimado Ranil. Muchas gracias, un gusto saludarlos. Que pasen bien.
Gracias a usted también. Es un gran orgullo para mí. Gracias.
What a great words. We have the interpretation, so everything was in English. So thank you so much for changing. That was not in the plan, but it was so
Perfecto. Sí, 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 sí.
perfect for
Qué
the moment.
emoción. Para mí un gran emoción, realmente.
Yeah, so I don't know, Lubia, you are the you're the one. Like, if I can continue doing questions, we have many, but let me know, Lubia.
I think we have about 15 minutes left. We can
Okay.
take. Yes, we are good on
Okay.
time. So if you have any questions there.
Yeah, we have some on the chat from Fleur Le Parquier from Spain. How do you think we should collective work to sustain financially analog forestry projects to make it affordable for all?
Okay.
That's a great
Okay.
question.
Sure. See, we have to look, we can design and build beautiful farms and beautiful analog forests. But in the end, the only income we can get is whatever crop we can sell from our farm. We can have a beautiful farm, but in the end, it's only the coffee beans that will give us the income. With analog forestry, we are creating a huge wealth that is going to be recognized in the future to come. Today, already, biodiversity has become a huge story. People are looking to invest in biodiversity. They don't know how. You can look at the web, you can look at people, they're trying to do this. With us, we have the solution. We are doing it. When we can prove we can do it, we only need to have formal protocols in which to measure and third-party people to verify, monitor and verify, and we can have a product. These are things that we have to come together and build up as a group. The other is we have the certification system. And the certification system now, at the moment, we're using it only for food. But we can use it for other things. We can use the certification system towards cooling, towards ecosystem services, towards biodiversity. These are things we can build up and then look at how we can add value to our farms for the work that we are doing that has not been recognized under the current economy. Under the current economy, only those few grains of coffee or whatever is what we can sell. There's a lot of new interest coming in ecosystem services, in biodiversity. And as these come, we should be first as an organization to be able to capitalize on these new markets that are opening up and create the new wealth for our farmers who are practicing analog forestry and looking at all the land management techniques that are around. We have the technique that gives us the greatest biodiversity, gives us the greatest photosynthetic biomass, which gives us the greatest ecosystem services production. And we should now be learning on how to capitalize on this into the future.
Yeah, and we have a question from Marisol also, like talking about that, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about like this. How can you measure the carbon sequestration and the biomass generation from the analog forestries?
Yeah, a couple of things. On carbon sequestration, it's easy. That's the DBH of trees, and we look at the amount of biomass, above ground biomass. But the carbon sequestration today is being used as an excuse to burn more fossil fuel. See, when they say carbon neutrality, they say, okay, plant a tree, it will fix some carbon, and that will make up for the carbon that you're burning in a motor car. That is totally wrong. That doesn't work, because the carbon that we burn in fossil fuel is 20 to 100 million years old. So when we burn the coal or the oil, that thing was 100 million years old, or 20 million, 30 million years old as fossil. You have to put that carbon away for 30 million years if it's going to be neutral. That patently cannot be done. So carbon trading, the way it's being done today, is a scam, because it is not true. You cannot put that carbon away to make it neutral. However, consider that when you are burning that fossil fuel, you're doing something else. You're using 2 molecules of biotic oxygen from the atmosphere to make the CO2. That O2 we can put back. That you can grow green material, photosynthetic biomass, and put back. And also, if you look at the oxygen and not at the carbon, you double your money, because it's CO2. So we should be looking and saying, look, we are not interested in the putting away of an impossible molecule of carbon, but we can certainly put back the 2 molecules of atoms of oxygen into the atmosphere. That we can do in 1 year. Actually, you can do that in 1 week, right? So there is a new way. This is the way we should build up our arguments, our discussions, amongst us in the network. These are the discussions we must have. And then this is how we should be presenting ourselves to the world into the future.
So Ranil, how do you see the forests grow? Like you were talking about like plants from the Amazon in Sri Lanka, plants in Indonesia. Like our plants are they don't have passport before. Now it's hard to to change. But how do you envision the forests that we will grow next?
Yeah, it is all with known and utility species. Now, there is such a thing called a pan-tropical biodiversity. Every country has a mango tree in the tropics. Every country will have a papaya tree in the tropics. That is pan-tropical. We have spread this around. Usually this happens from the botanic gardens. The botanic gardens of each country bring these plants in, they test them, and what's good then goes out into the country. Other times, informally, people bring plants in. With Analog Forestry, we have a thing called the ecological screen, because we have a seed exchange program. And before we exchange seeds with each other from one country to another, we go through the ecological screen to make sure there are no problems. And then if the plant goes through, the seed goes through the screen, then we plant it in our plants, we test it out, and if it works and if it's good, then we release it and we send it out into the public. That's the process that we have been working on. And you will see that whether it be temperate zones, Mediterranean zones, or tropical zones around the planet, there are things that are ubiquitous. Those things are found all over. And those are the common elements that we can use as the base in our designs.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ranil. So we have a hand up. We want to give also the audience a little bit of the... So Ranil, if you want the interpretation, you have interpretation in the bottom if you want to listen in English. But Marta Núñez, do you want to open the mic and the camera to ask question? Or...
Muchas gracias, Galo. No voy a abrir mi cámara por el momento, pero primero quería mandarle un abrazo fuertísimo a Ranil. Es un placer verlo y creo que hago eco de los deseos de quienes están diciendo que tienes que venir a Ecuador, Ranil. Queremos verte por aquí nuevamente y abrazarte, amigo querido,
Gracias.
de tantos años. Quería preguntarte algo con respecto a lo que mencionaste sobre lo del mercado de carbono. Tú sabes que aquí tenemos en nuestra Constitución un artículo que nos permite tener un poco de candado con respecto a esta gran apertura del mercado de carbono en todo el mundo, pero lo han tratado de modificar varias veces y ahora también tenemos ya una regulación supuestamente para el tema del mercado de carbono. Entonces, mi pregunta, amigo, es si es que tienes algo escrito de lo que acabas de explicar de esta gran diferencia, ¿no es cierto?, entre lo uno y lo otro. Sería fantástico que podamos contar con algo escrito para poder aquí también difundir entre la gente que además tiene unas expectativas tan altas sobre el mercado de carbono que es bastante peligroso en estos momentos aquí en el país y en otras partes del mundo. Un abrazo, querido.
Gracias, Marta.
Gracias. Gracias, Marta. Yeah, sure. I will send the articles. I have few articles that give the background, and I'll send it to the Secretariat. And I'll ask the Secretariat if you can send it to Martha or anybody else who's interested. You might have to do translations, unfortunately. It's in English. But I'll send you the things, by tomorrow or day after. And please share it with people who are interested. I'll send it to everybody.
Thank you, Ranil. We have some minutes left, and we have some questions that were there. So we have one question from Marco Alvarado from Ecuador. On the risk of snake bite accidents in analog forest, do you increase or decrease in analog forestry? How do you prevent or manage?
How do you increase what?
The snake bites accidents. He's talking about snake bites accidents, and in the analog forestry, they increase or decrease? Do you have any?
Okay. Well, I mean, in any farm, anywhere, you have to make sure that your pathways are kept clean. That is the most important. I've had many snake bites, because I catch snakes. I used to collect snakes. That was my work in the old days. And when you go looking for snakes, they don't come out looking for you. You have to go looking for them. You have to turn over. So you make sure you don't have logs, planks, and other items that snakes can live under. You make sure that debris is not in your farm. That is number one. Clear debris. And the other thing is try to control your rodent population, because that's the other thing that brings because for the frogs and for the birds, the non-venomous snakes you don't have to worry about. You're really concerned about the venomous snakes. And in your areas, mostly the venomous snakes are coming after the small mammals, and ensure that you do not have too much a population of small mammals, or you control that, and you don't have planks, logs, things that things can hide under close to human habitation and pathways. I mean, that's the best way you can avoid the snakes. But remember one thing, as your diversity increases, so will the predators. Snakes will also come. So you have to keep your pathways clean. You have to understand that snakes are a part of the ecosystem, and then design your ecosystem so that they don't come close into contact with you.
And if I can add that, also, I see more snakes when, like the venomous snake, the Bothros asper, that we have here. More snakes when we have like only grass, tall grass, than now that we have like
that's because of the rodents.
Uh-huh. Okay.
That's because of the rodents. Because they have to eat, and what they eat are the rodents.
Mm-hmm. So I think now we are on a good time, and I just wanna thank again Ranil for your time, for your patience, for your knowledge, for everything that you give to us. As Angelito Suco said, you have left a lot of seeds all over the world, and we are growing this family of
Great.
tree lovers and tree planters. And I think one of the key things that maybe we need to talk about like is the importance of the endemic species and the critical endangered species also,
Uh-huh.
no? To be part of all our designs, all of our projects, to have this responsibility. And also we have to keep doing nurseries with like to exchange seeds and exchange trees, and that's what Rifa and Refa is doing, and in a large scale network. So I'm gonna thank you for all the team from Ecuador and from Costa Rica for being here, and I hope this video can be for knowledgeable for people, and they can learn from here now on. And we hope this course in English can open all other doors for more people to come to the family. I give you the floor, Ranil. If you have any last thoughts that you can say, or anything that you can like want to just uh, finish it with.
Yeah, well, what I'd like to share with everybody, like I said that before, is when I started Analog Forestry, I started it to create habitat for frogs, snakes, lizards, and birds. That's how I started. But you find that when you start looking after life, life turns around and grows with you. And analog forestry, which was started off to help the biodiversity, is now looking at like the land management system that can answer much of the problems that we are going to have to face with climate change. And it can also answer the big need today to create a source of wealth different to that comes from the burning of oil. We have the chance, using trees and plants, to create such an economy, and analog forestry is the strongest approach by which we can do that. So learn more about this, and I'll be happy to help everybody. And I wish you all a wonderful future, helping the planet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I give the floor to Luby or Virginie, so you can close up the meeting. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much. And before we say a few last words, we want to invite everybody to open their cameras, give us a little smile. We will take a group picture to remember this day. So I'm going to wait a couple moments for you all to turn on your cameras and see your lovely faces. Okay, I'm going to count to 3
Okay.
to take the photo. So 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to do it on 2 screens, so don't move. Okay, this is the first screen. And now on the other screen, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, we are good now. And just as a final word, Luby, maybe you can pull up our final slide. So thank you to everybody who shared beautiful images, loving images for our planet. This space has been loaded with knowledge, emotion, connection, and I think this is the essence of our network. It's built through relationships, mutual support across continents, and it has really been an honor for us to host this space. Thank you so much, Ranil and Galo, for your time and for facilitating this beautiful conversation, inspiring conversation. Thank you also to our skilled interpreters who adapted rapidly and made this talk available across languages. And as a final invitation, let's remember Ranil's words. We are here to create the forests that other people will sit under in the future. That is what we have taken on and what we're proud to share with the world. Thank you so much, everybody. Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
And this brings our space to an end. Feel free to start
Thank you very much.
leaving, or if you want to say a few goodbye words. I will stop the recording.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Ranil.